What year were you born, or did you move to OOB?
I was born in Loranger Beach in 1941, shortly before World War II started. When Pearl Harbor was bombed. Yeah, I was born in November of that year.
Do you have any siblings? If so, do they live in town?
I've been married for 52 years, going on 53. I have a daughter, Amanda, who was born and raised in Loranger Beach. She now lives in Michigan. And I have a son that took over Radley's Market from me years ago, and he's now living in North Carolina after we sold the business. So I have a daughter and a son and a wife, and 6 grandchildren. Nobody lives in Loranger any longer. Nobody in the family. I live in Scarborough, Maine, but I'm trustee of the library and treasurer of the library in Loranger. So giving back to the community.
Where did you live in town?
I lived originally on 93 Portland Avenue, and that was a house that was in the back of Portland Avenue, and is now Lewis Avenue, and that's where I was born and raised, right close to the old kite track and the old racetrack that was back in that area of town, right behind where Radley's Market is today, or Landry's Shopping Center.
Did you go to a lot of the races at kite track?
Yes, I did. I used to crawl underneath the grandstand after the races and look for coins and stuff. And I played and grew up right close to the kite track. It was one of my favorite places. And I used to play on the racetrack, and we used to get down to Little River and catch a lot of fish and bring them home, and my mother would cook them. And it was walking distance from where I lived. It was right close to Walton Street, right back of Walton Street. I ended up owning a house right on Portland Avenue, right abutting the kite track land, yeah, where I raised my children.
What was your childhood like in OOB? What was your childhood like in OOB? You already answered this a little bit. But...
What was it like growing up?
Yeah.
Well, my father owned Radley's Market. We were on the main street. It was Radley's Nationwide way back in those days. And I spent a lot of time on the beach. I spent a lot of time working in the store, sorting bottles back in those days when bottles were worth a lot of money, and playing and going to the amusement park and riding the Ferris wheel, doing the donkey ride and the whale's mouth, and it was quite a nice place to play, and even in the wintertime we'd play down there when there was nobody around, and it was fun. That was a great part of Loranger Beach, was growing up in, that when it was a lot quieter than it is today. We rode our bikes back in those days with no helmets and all the gear that they wear today. So, and that was fun.
Beach school system?
I went to the old Loranger Beach school system until my sophomore year, and then I moved out to California. But I started school in old Loranger Beach. My first school was on School Street, which was grades 1 through kindergarten through 3rd grade, I think, or something like that. And one of my favorite things back in those days was I was a crossing guard. And we had a badge that the police gave us, and we had a bandana that we wore, and we were kind of in charge of crossing at the town hall. That's where I crossed, because I lived right near there. And right in front of where the town hall is, there was a sidewalk, and that's where the kids crossed to go to school in the morning. And you felt pretty prestigious and proud, because you got to tell the kids when they could cross and things like that. So it was being a crossing guard. You got a badge and everything. It was fun. It was hard to be a lifeguard back when I was one, because Sorry, are you taping?
It's fine. Are there any stories about the history of Old Orchard Beach that you experienced that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, I was 7 years old, and we had a big fire in Orchard Beach, and a lot of people don't know about it, but my neighbor was Reggie Lewis, who was a plumber. His son was 3 years old, and when the fire started, he put us in the back of his pickup truck. We drove down the end of Walnut Street, drove onto the beach, and drove down the beach and under the pier, and we watched the wooden roller coaster burn to the ground. It was quite a spectacular fire, and a lot of people don't know about it. That was 1948. That was a roller coaster fire, and it was treated with a lot of chemicals back in those, creosote, I think, in the wood and stuff, so it went up very fast. And it was a big fire. And then I was a junior fireman when I was in school, which we would go and help firemen fight fires. And then when I got older, I was a volunteer fireman. So I fought a lot of big fires here in Old. I fought the Ferris wheel when it burned down, and the Whale's Mouth, and that whole side of the street and part of the pier burned. But that was, there's not many people that today that can say that they saw the fire of 1948, and I was there. So it was quite spectacular for a 7-year-old boy to see a big fire like that, especially sitting in the back of a pickup truck on the beach.
Yeah. What are some things in OOB that drastically changed throughout your lifetime here? And have you been affected by any way?
Nothing that's really affected me. I've seen the population grow quite substantially. I've seen a lot of development, a lot of houses built in different places. I've seen probably the biggest change is the traffic now that we have compared to when I was growing up, and the amount of tent and trailer parks there are. There was only 1 or 2 when I was a young kid, and they became real popular all of a sudden, and became real big camp areas for people on the East Coast. And a lot of Canadians come here because it's the closest beach to Quebec City and Montreal. It's saltwater ocean for them to go swimming in. They come here and they think the water's warm. We think it's cold. And I think that Loranger Beach has really become a real family resort community, and it's nice to see the changes that are here in the town since I've grown up. Probably could think of a lot of other things if I,
You've already said one, but have you been a witness of any other catastrophic events in OOB, and has it affected you in any way?
Well, when I was a junior fireman, we had a fire, I think it was on Union Avenue or Atlantic Avenue, and it was probably the worst fire I'd ever been to as being a volunteer fireman. 5 children died in the fire, and it was quite a catastrophe. It was sad back then. That was probably in the middle 50s, I think, when that happened, and that was pretty catastrophic for me being that age. Nothing more than the big fires that we've had in town over the years.
What made you want to stay in OOB as an adult?
I love the community. I love the state of Maine, and I'm a maniac. And you know the difference between a Mainer and a maniac. A maniac is somebody who was born and raised in Maine. A Mainer is somebody that wishes they were born and raised in Maine. So you can remember that. That's something I've remembered all my life, because I learned it when I was your age. So that's something you can put in your piggy bank and talk about later in life.
Do in OOB? Do you have a favorite thing to do now in OOB too?
I think my favorite thing to do is go swimming, and I went to California when I was a sophomore in high school, and I spent few years out there, but I'm still considered a graduate from Loranger High School, so I still go to their functions and things like that. And I learned to surf in California, and I brought the first surfboards back to the state of Maine, and I loved to surf. That was the thing, and my son followed in my footsteps. He was a big surfer, and when I lifeguarded, I, had a surfboard after I got done lifeguarding. I'd spend a lot of time surfing and spend a lot of time in the water, and fishing and hunting. Little River was a real attractive place to go fishing, and back in those days, we got a lot of white perch, and I'd go down after school, and I'd bring the white perch home. My mother would cook them for us, and there was a place down there, and when the track flooded in the springtime, that I could go out and walk in the water up to my knees when it was warm enough, and I could spear German carp, which were big fish, and they got into Little River by accident, and I would bring them down the end of Walnut Street to the Jewish neighborhood, and I'd yell "carp for sale," and I'd pull them down there in my little red wagon, and it was interesting to get down there and make 50 cents and come home with a pocket full of candy. So it was fun. Growing up as a child in Loranger was my favorite experience. I really enjoyed it, and had a lot of fun and a lot of good friends, and enjoyed sports and played Little League. I was a Cub Scout, Boy Scout, and back in the days when that was more popular than it is today.
What was your favorite place to hang out in OOB? Why, and why? Is it still there?
I thought, growing up, one of my favorite places was to go to the movies that were in the top of the town hall. And there was a movie, they would on the weekends have movies for children. And we'd go up there and watch a lot of cowboy movies, a lot of old movies, and Gene Autry movies, and a lot of different movies. And that was a fun thing to do on the weekends, was to go to the town hall. And then the church across the street from the town hall, the Catholic Church, St. Margaret's, they had dance lessons. So when I got to be in the 8th grade or so, we would go there for dance lessons in the evening, and it was a lot of fun. And that's where I learned to dance. And back then it wasn't all just rock and roll. It was, you had to learn the waltz and cha-cha and stuff like that. So it was fun growing up. So we look forward to the nights that we would have dance lessons. Mm-hmm. So you could pick out your favorite girl and try to dance with her. If you were fast enough to, all the boys sat on one side of the room and all the girls on the other side of the room, and they'd say, "Pick a partner," and everybody would run to the same girl. So it's kind of fun.
Were there any big landmarks that people may not know about today that you may like to share?
I liked Cascade Falls as a kid growing up. I played up there a lot, and there's a bear cage that was way back in the woods there, and that was a fun place to play and after school, and to go up there with a bunch of guys and climb around the falls and go through the woods up there and follow this, look at the waterfalls and things like that. Was a nice landmark. There was an old cemetery on Portland Avenue that I used to go and visit, and just look at the tombstones and see how old it was and how many years ago people were buried there. And that's the biggest landmarks, I think. And there was an old the old ice houses, especially up on the road, Adelaide Road, I think, that goes up behind Saco Benefit Savings, went to a pond up there where there was an ice house. And way back when I was a kid growing up, we didn't have refrigerators. The ice man used to come into our house and put a nice block of ice in our refrigerator. And the refrigerator was on in the back room of the house, and he just would walk right in and put a fresh block of ice in to keep your food cold and stuff like that. And so that was kind of different. And, yeah. So those are some of the landmarks and some of the places that I like to hang out.
When you were growing up?
Actually, I never did see the pier where my father and mother met on the end of the pier at a dance. And that's how they met. My mother was from Westbrook, Maine. My father worked here in Owacha Beach for a grocery store. And they met at a dance on the end of the pier. And that's how they ended up getting married. And back in the 30s, late 30s. I think they were married in 1937. And so that was an interesting place, into the pier. Then I watched one big storm after that was destroyed, the pier, the end of the pier was destroyed once. And then another storm came in and destroyed pretty much a lot of the pier, and they rebuilt it. It's a lot shorter now than it used to be. It used to go way out in the ocean. It's quite a bit shorter today. But I always swim around the pier when I was a lifeguard. In the mornings, that's how we used to train, swim around the pier, and before we'd go on duty. And it was some pretty cold water. Some pretty, yeah. So I know a lot about the pier.
Anything else you'd like to share?
Think on that a little bit. I think that one of the things that growing up as a kid really helped me a lot was being a member of the Libby, the library. And I can remember going to the library, and you didn't even dare to sneeze because the lady that was running the library was very, very strict back in those days. But we had a lot of fun. Enjoyed going to the library. I think kids today should spend more time in the library. It's a learning experience. So I think from all the years that I was in business in the town, and since I moved out of town, I want to give something back to a community that I was born and raised in and love so much. So I'm a treasurer of the library, trustee of the library, and I will continue doing that. I enjoy it and have a lot of fun there. It's a nice library. It's really got a lot bigger than when I was a kid. I think the town of Owacha Beach is a real nice town now compared to what it used to be back in the 60s when we had a lot of motorcycle problems with gang problems. Not gangs, so much gang problems, but in the summer it was rowdy, and now it's more of a family-oriented town. So it's a great place for people to vacation, and it's a great place to be born and raised in. And the school system here is nice, and I enjoy it.
You miss being a kid?
That's a tough question. Do I miss being a kid? Well, some ways I do and some ways I don't. I'd like to be a kid today just to know what I know and know like everybody my age, I think, that if you ask them the same thing, they'd say, I'd like to be a kid today and know what I know today, growing up. But I've had a good life, especially with all the friends I made here in Owacha Beach and running a business here, and all the times I've had, good times I've had here in Owacha Beach. I wouldn't really change. I'd keep it the way it is.
Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Think on that a little bit. I think that one of the things that, growing up as a kid really helped me a lot was being a member of the Libby, the library. And I can remember going to the library and you didn't even dare to sneeze because the lady that was running the library was very, very strict back in those days. But we had a lot of fun, enjoyed going to the library. I think kids today should spend more time in the library. It's a learning experience. So I think from all the years that I was in business in the town, and since I moved out of town, I want to give something back to a community that I was born and raised in and love so much. So I'm a treasurer of the library, trustee of the library, and I will continue doing that. I enjoy it and have a lot of fun there. It's a nice library. It's really got a lot bigger than when I was a kid. I think the town of Loranger Beach is a real nice town now compared to what it used to be back in the 60s when we had a lot of motorcycle problems with gang problems. Not gangs, so much gang problems, but in the summer it was rowdy, and now it's more of a family-oriented town. So it's a great place for people to vacation, and it's a great place to be born and raised in. And the school system here is nice, and I enjoy it.
It says here, did you ever go to any of the concerts at the Ballpark or Pier?
I went to one or two concerts, and I can't really remember who they performed. I wasn't really into music. My wife was, and that's the reason I went to the concerts. But I did go to a lot of the main guides baseball games at the Ballpark. And I was a season ticket holder at the main guides way back when. And I met a lot of the ball players. As a matter of fact, a couple of them that became major league players, lived in my little house behind where I lived on Portland Avenue, and I rented it to them in the summer, and enjoyed going to a lot of the games. And I was chairman of the town planning board of the town at the time when we approved the Ballpark. And it's too bad it didn't last, but it was a good AA ballpark.
Famous people that have come to visit OOB?
Growing up on Portland Avenue, a lot of the people that performed on the pier used to stay at my house, so there was quite a few. There was a house not on Portland Avenue that who let the Negroes stay there at their house back in the days when there was a lot of trying to think of the word, racism, and they couldn't stay in the same hotels as white people did, and they stayed at the Emerson House, I think it was, on Portland Avenue. And when they were full, we had some of them, my mother would rent rooms to some of them at our house on Portland Avenue. And that was, I remember as a boy meeting some of them. Real famous people, just can't think of any right offhand that I met.
What year did you move to town?
I actually was born in Biddeford at the Weber Hospital. That was the Southern Maine Hospital, that Southern Maine Medical was the Weber Hospital. And my parents brought me home to the house that I actually still live in Old Orchard Beach. So I have lived in the same house for 68 years. Not with my parents. Yeah, 68 years in the same house, same neighborhood.
Do you have any siblings that live in town?
I do not. I had one brother that graduated from Loranger Beach High School. He passed away in 1994.
Sorry to hear that.
So I'm the lone survivor, the elder of the family. I have my brother's niece, Stephanie Matsatsis, which I'm sure that you will meet someday. She works at the high school, is very involved in student activities, and I have a niece that lives in Virginia Beach she has 3 children that I get to see a lot because I am retired now, so I can travel down there and I can bring them up here in the summertime. Best childhood in OOB. I grew up in a small neighborhood just off Washington Avenue, and it was very family-oriented, it was lifelong residents there. My next-door neighbor was actually Chief Kelly, Chief of Police, and his brother, Jay. I have a friend that lived around the corner from me. Her name was Mary Jane Ahern. And we were actually friends before we were even born. Our mothers were pregnant together, and they used to walk every day together. So we actually got to know each other before we were even born. But we have spent, and she still lives in Old Orchard. They own a business in Old Orchard. So we have spent every single birthday together because we were both born 20 days apart. And we have spent every birthday together for 68 years. I go to her birthday, she comes to my birthday. Sometimes it's a big birthday, sometimes it's just her and me celebrating with a cupcake. But we spend a lot of time together. I've worked for her, she's worked for me, and we just stayed really good friends. But I think as a child in Old Orchard, our neighborhood I thought that was it. I didn't want to go anyplace else because there were so many kids in my neighborhood. We'd get up every single morning and we would be outside. And depending on what was going on in the news or in school or in each other's lives, that's what we focused on for the day. So, and we made everything up. So we really played. We didn't have video games, and I really sound old now. We didn't have video games and all that, but we played basketball. And we pretended that we were the NBA, we were Larry Bird, or we played football, we played baseball in the street. My father's car was first base, and we put a rock on second base, and the fence post on the other side was third base, and home plate was someone's jacket. And we just had fun. We had to be dragged in every single night. The rule was that you had to come in when the street plays went on. And we tried to follow those rules. On Fort Hill Avenue in Old Orchard, I walked down there just maybe a year ago. And then there was a hill down there that we used to go sliding. We had flying saucers. You know what flying saucers are?
Yeah, the little sleds.
Yeah, they're just round metal. Now they're plastic, but they were round metal sleds, and we would dress up and we would go to Fort Hill Avenue and we would slide on that hill from 8 o'clock in the morning until the streetlights went on. Jane actually got a concussion there. I don't think anybody knew it was a concussion. She broke her ribs there. She's the only one that ever got hurt, but she was kind of like the guinea pig. We kind of like, you try this. We made jumps. We had races, we built forts. We actually, this is actually a pretty good story. We decided there's a big wooded area down there too, which we were not allowed to be in, but we would go in there once in a while. And we found a bunch of old bed springs, and they don't even make bed springs anymore, but they're just, it's a frame with springs on it. And we got this wonderful idea that we were going to make a trampoline park. So we got shovels and we dug holes and we propped up the bed springs over the holes, and then we'd have people come and jump on them. And we probably ran the business for like 3 days until we were digging one day and we hit a water main or something, and the whole sand pit filled with water, and we just took off running. Town trucks were coming, so we did do some damage there. And they took the bed frames away, so our business took our first business away. My father owned a grocery store in Old Orchard on Washington Avenue, so that was kind of the place where I started working when I was really young. I loved going there, spending time with my dad. Learned how to use the cash register, could make change without it. Cash register telling you how much you're supposed to give back. And a lot of people knew a lot of people. Like, I didn't just have a mother and father. Everybody in every house was the mother and father. So you couldn't do anything in town because they all knew you. So Jane's mother and father, and Dana's mother and father, and up the street, you couldn't do anything wrong. By the time you got home that night for dinner, it was like, so what did you do today? And you had to tell the truth because they already knew what you did today. And if it was anything wrong, someone had already told them. So it was tight-knit, it was very safe, spent a lot of time outside, but I still have those friends, are still my friends. Chief Kelly, his brother Dana, sister Karen, Jane. One of the people that you were going to ask today, Ricky Hearn, he was one of the, she had 5 brothers and sisters, and so we all kind of knew each other, and we still do. What was the question? I think it was,
What was your
what was it
child?
like in the Loranger Beach school system? I started school at School Street School down on School Street. I was able to walk to school in the morning, and nobody had to walk us. Our parents didn't have to. When I left my house, I would meet Jane on the corner, and we would walk to school. And there was a telephone pole. So if I turned around and I looked toward my house, my mother was in the kitchen window, and she was waving, and that was like, okay, you're safe, see you later. I would walk to school, and I was in both buildings. I was in kindergarten in one building, and I was in 2nd and 3rd grade in the 2nd building. We'd go home for lunch. The bell would ring, and we would walk home for lunch, and then we would go back to school in the afternoon. And then I came to Jameson School. It was brand new then, I think. It wasn't very old. And I was there for 4 and 5, I think, or 3, 4, 5. And then I was in the federal building, which was actually a school that was in this parking lot down here. And I went to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade there, part of my 8th grade. It burnt down during my 8th grade year. And that was pretty exciting to have you. It was sad, but it was, when you're in the 8th grade, if your school burned down, and in your mind, you're like, I'm not going to have to go to school anymore. I'm like, I got the whole year off. And that's when this part wasn't here, but there was a high school, and we had split sessions. So the high school went in the morning, and then we went in the afternoon, and then I went into high school the following year, and then I went in the morning, and they, middle school went in the afternoon. It took like almost 2 years to build Loranger School. And then I went to high school here. I went to high school here, yeah. That high school wasn't built yet. But I, K to 12, went to school, was very active, played a lot of sports.
What kind of sports did you play?
Well, I played everything that they offered, and unfortunately, when I was in high school, girls didn't play. They didn't really have a fall sport. They had field hockey, which I wasn't interested in. They didn't have soccer. I played a lot of golf because my father played golf. I played basketball. I played softball, pitcher in softball. And I would have played more if they hadn't. I would have played anything. But after school activity, I tried to get into as many activities as I could. I loved just being involved in whatever I could be in.
Your first job in OOB?
My first job in Old Orchard Beach was working for my dad, actually. I worked for him until, and I was really lucky because most kids couldn't work until you were old enough to get a worker's permit. But when your father owns a business, you're expected to work. So I would work I worked at his store from, I don't know, I went to summer camp until I was probably, I don't know, 11 maybe. And then I really wanted to go to work. My father had 2 stores then, one in Ocean Park and one in Old Orchard. And so I worked for him. And then my first, when everybody else, all my friends started getting jobs, when they were old enough to get jobs, I started wanting to strike out and get out from underneath my parents' rule. And so my father actually said, you know what, maybe you should go get another job. And I said, great. And I ended up working for day camp, Happy Day Camp. And I was a camp counselor for until Happy Day Camp closed down, and then all the counselors that worked there, we opened up our own camp. We opened up Sunnybrook Camp Sunnybrook, and I worked Camp Sunnybrook until we all finished college, and then everybody went their separate ways and the camps closed. But I've always worked, and then I just started working in the school system, so I've always really just worked in Old Orchard as well.
Historical things that happened?
When I was the pier burned down in 1969. I actually was babysitting in Ocean Park. Family that came up from New York every year. They had a house right on the beach. I was babysitting for their 3 children, and David was putting the garbage out or something, and he's screaming, fire, fire, and I thought, great, the house is on fire or something. I ran out, and because it was right on the beach, we just stood right on the dunes and watched the pier burn. There were no cell phones, there were no phones, so there was no way to call anybody to find out, what was happening or that we were okay. And the parents, their parents were coming, they had gone out to dinner, and they were supposed to be back by 10. And so 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock was midnight, and I was starting to panic because I didn't know how to let my parents know that I was still okay. They didn't know. Nobody could move in town because there were so many fire trucks. finally they, and nobody would let anybody into town. That was the biggest problem. They had blocked off all the roads because everybody wanted to come see the pier burn down. But we sat, the three of us, the three kids I was babysitting for and myself, we just sat in the dunes and we just watched. We watched the fire burn, and finally I got to go home, and it was kind of devastating the next day to go down there and see that everything was gone. It was just, it was kind of sad. I mean, it had always been there, and we never thought it was going to come back. And that was when the pier was a lot longer. I never saw any of the dances on the pier or any of that, but that part of the pier, that casino part of the pier, was still there. That's what ended up, well, actually, that's not true. The casino part of the pier actually went down in a big storm in the 70s, 1975, 6, 7, 8, something like that. I think it was like 78, because I think my niece was born, and I remember walking down there with her. But the big merry-go-round, the coaster, the big slide coaster, which, all these rides were probably so unsafe. It was crazy. I remember riding the coaster. I didn't want to ride it, but had a friend that worked at it, and he was like, "It's fine, it's safe." And you had to climb up yourself, and then you got on a rug, and you went. It was like straight down. Did you ever see a picture of it?
Mm-mm.
Oh my goodness, it's ridiculous. It's got to be, I'm gonna say, 4 or 5 stories high, and it's just straight down. And then so that burnt. The Noah's Ark burnt. So all the big, I think everything that people really came to see was gone. And that happened in June, I think. I don't really have any memory of the rest of the summer. It was like summer was kind of over.
What are some things that have changed throughout your time living here?
Well, everything has changed. I think the biggest change, and I think that they're trying to bring it back a little bit. The area that I lived in, the neighborhood that I lived in, was Washington Avenue. If you're not familiar with Washington Avenue, it's not the same. On Washington Avenue, which was walking distance, there was a pharmacy, a soda fountain. That's where people used to just go and hang out, and there was like a jukebox that you could play music, but after school, that's where people went. They went to the soda fountain. There was a hardware store, and in the hardware store, they sold everything. They sold hardware for like tools. If you broke your window, you could go have it changed there. They sold toys. They sold some clothing, and they sold penny candy and school supplies. So it was like an everything store. You could go in there and just hang out and look at stuff. That was my father's grocery store. And there was a second grocery store, Dixon's. So there were 2 grocery stores in that neighborhood. There was an appliance store. There was a barber shop. There was a photo shop where you could go and have family portraits done, or if you graduated from high school, you could go have your high school picture done there. And it was a neighborhood too. So there was always a lot of people around. Christmas time, it was decorated for Christmas, and in the summertime, it was, full of people that you didn't even know, because people still came for the summer. The basketball courts on Atlantic Avenue, have you ever been there?
Yeah, it's all
Courts.
worn down now.
Yeah, it's all
Yeah.
worn down. Well, that was brand new. When I was a kid, that was a brand new basketball court. And so we were young when they first put it up, and we thought we had like a stadium. We thought it was the best thing. We played 365 days a year there. If it snowed, we would shovel it off, and we would play basketball all day. But here's the thing that would happen. When we were young, when we were the youngest ones that played basketball, we would get up early and we'd shovel it all off, and we would play, usually with a flat basketball, by the way. And then the older kids would come, and they'd say, hit the road, thanks for shoveling. And they would play during the best part of the day, and then we'd go back later on during the day when it was icy, and we'd play some more. But it was really used by all age groups. Like, we used it, older kids used it, high school kids used it. It was like a park. It was really nice. No lights. We would have a car drive up at night when we wanted to use it, and those would be our lights. But I think there are lights on it now. I think they just put lights on it. What was the neighborhood like, right? So that was the biggest part, was Washington Avenue was like the center of town for us. And that there were just a lot of kids in my neighborhood. I grew up with the same kids. We went to school together, we worked together, we played together, we did everything together.
What made you stay in OOB as an adult?
Well, when my parents both passed away, I had the house here, and I thought it's probably as much as I think I wanted to kind of strike out, and I did it a little bit, I always came back. And then I started working for the school department. I actually ran for the school board when I was just 20. So I was only out of high school for maybe a year and a half. And I decided I wanted to run for the school board. And the biggest reason, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but the biggest reason I ran for the school board was when I graduated from high school, I wanted to be an architect. And my guidance counselor told me, girls can't be architects. I like that phrase. Girls can't be architects. So I got angry, and I said, well, I don't want to be anything else. That's what I want to be. And I decided that maybe I can change that. Maybe I can change the way people think about that. So I ran for the school board. And I knocked on every single door, probably not every single door, but a lot of doors in Orchard Beach, because people probably didn't know me out of my own neighborhood, and I was young. And I knocked on every door, and I talked to as many people as I could talk to, and I convinced them that I would love to be on the school board, and that I think I could make a difference. And I was on the school board for 8 years. I was on the school board when they built the new high school. I actually broke ground for the new high school, and they had a groundbreaking ceremony. I took the first shovelful. It might have been the very beginning of, but now girls can do anything they want to do. I think you would agree. And I'm sorry I did not become an architect, but I'm an artist, so I still am able to express myself in that way. But staying in Old Orchard was, I think I had to stay here. And that kind of was the reason why I wanted to make a difference.
OOB.
Favorite things to do, and going to the beach, for sure, going to the beach. I loved golf, and I started playing golf when I was really young with my dad, and I played at Old Orchard Beach Country Club, which was not dune grass. It was just a little 9-hole course. I think I enjoyed, my grandparents moved here from New York, and I learned a lot about gardening from my grandfather. So there were seasonal things I really liked to do. In the summertime, I really liked being at the ocean, and in the wintertime, I liked to ski. Wasn't in Old Orchard, but I like to do that. I like the community, you know, I like that small community feel where people do know you. I can still go for a walk in my neighborhood and stop and talk to anybody that comes out of their house. So I like that part. I like the part that it's small and people are friendly. I'm sure there's a lot more that I like about it, and I guess I don't think about it. It's comfortable.
Favorite place to hang out?
Favorite place to hang out? I liked hanging out in probably a gymnasium. When this school was the high school, the gym was where the art room is and the rec room, where the rec department is. That was the gym. And when we were young, we knew the coach, John McSweeney. Actually, that gymnasium is named after him. And we would get together, like 4 or 5 of us, and we would just, we'd sneak up here, and he would be having basketball practice with the high school boys, and he'd see us. There was like a window up above, and you could look down in, and so we would come in the school, and we'd go in those windows, and we'd watch them playing down below, and then he would see us, and when he was leaving, he would look up to see us up there, and he'd roll out a basketball, and he'd tell us to lock the doors when we went up. So we'd go down and we'd play basketball until the street lights went on, and then we would go home. But I liked that. That was one of my favorite things to do. I love walking the beach. I've always liked walking the beach. There's less and less that I like doing in Old Orchard because it's going away. You know, there's no place to shop. There's no place to. It's like there's so much that you can do at home now. You don't even have to leave your house if you don't want to. I liked it when it was when you had to get up and go. But my favorite things were just hanging out with my friends and just having fun.
Are there any big landmarks that people may not know about today?
Big landmarks. I saw one of your questions was about the kite track. I never saw the kite track, and I never saw horses on the kite track. But when my brother was 8 years older than me, he loved cars. And he used to, with his friends, they would take their cars, they made a path, and they'd go on the kite track, and they would race their cars on the kite track, which was probably against the law. But I remember going with him a couple of times and seeing a track. I mean, I never knew it was there. Do you know where it is?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Do you know where, do you know on Portland Avenue, if you go behind Landry's, and you're going down right after Walnut Street, it goes down to the beach, and then there's a big curve.
Yeah.
It's right after that big curve in the woods, on the right-hand side. So if you were to walk, it's probably all grown over now and it's not there, but when I was younger, we'd walk in there, and you could actually see that there was a track there. There was some sort of a track. And like I said, the teenage boys used to take their cars down there, and they used to ride it around the track, get stuck. Other landmarks. There aren't a lot of landmarks left. I'm happy that I do remember the pier, the way it was. I almost think the ballpark can be a landmark now. It's getting old enough that it could be a landmark. I don't know if I thought about it. Can't think of any other landmarks.
What are some things that have changed throughout your time living here?
Everything has changed. I think the biggest change, and I think that they're trying to bring it back a little bit. The area that I lived in, the neighborhood that I lived in, was Washington Avenue. If you're not familiar with Washington Avenue, it's not the same. On Washington Avenue, which was walking distance, there was a pharmacy, a soda fountain. That's where people used to just go and hang out, and there was like a jukebox that you could play music, but after school, that's where people went. They went to the soda fountain. There was a hardware store, and in the hardware store, they sold everything. They sold hardware for like tools. If you broke your window, you could go have it changed there. They sold toys. They sold some clothing, and they sold penny candy and school supplies. So it was like an everything store. You could go in there and just hang out and look at stuff. That was my father's grocery store. And there was a second grocery store, Dixon's. So there were two grocery stores in that neighborhood. There was an appliance store. There was a barber shop. There was a photo shop where you could go and have family portraits done. Or if you graduated from high school, you could go have your high school picture done there. And it was a neighborhood too. So it was there was always a lot of people around. At Christmas time, it was decorated for Christmas, and in the summertime, it was, full of people that you didn't even know, because people still came for the summer. The basketball courts on Atlantic Avenue, have you ever been there?
Yeah, it's all
Courts.
worn down now.
Yeah, it's all worn down. Well, that was brand new. When I was a kid, that was a brand new basketball court. And so we were young when they first put it up, and we thought we had like a stadium. We thought it was the best thing. We played 365 days a year there. If it snowed, we would shovel it off, and we would play basketball all day. But here's the thing that would happen. When we were young, when we were the youngest ones that played basketball, we would get up early and we'd shovel it all off, and we would play, usually with a flat basketball, by the way. And then the older kids would come, and they'd say, hit the road, thanks for shoveling, and they would play during the best part of the day, and then we'd go back later on during the day when it was icy, and we'd play some more. But it was really used by all age groups. We used it, older kids used it, high school kids used it. It was like a park. It was really nice. No lights. We would have a car drive up at night when we wanted to use it, and those would be our lights. But I think there are lights on it now. I think they just put lights on it. What was the neighborhood like, right? So that was the biggest part, was Washington Avenue was like the center of town for us. And that there were just a lot of kids in my neighborhood. You know, I grew up with the same kids. We went to school together, we worked together, we played together, we did everything together.
What made you stay in OOB as an adult?
Well, when my parents both passed away, I had the house here, and I thought it's probably as much as I think I wanted to kind of strike out, and I did it a little bit, I always came back. And then I started working for the school department. I actually ran for the school board when I was just 20. So I was only out of high school for maybe a year and a half. And I decided I wanted to run for the school board. And the biggest reason, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but the biggest reason I ran for the school board was when I graduated from high school, I wanted to be an architect. And my guidance counselor told me, girls can't be architects. I like that phrase. Girls can't be architects. So I got angry, and I said, well, I don't want to be anything else. That's what I want to be. And I decided that maybe I can change that. Maybe I can change the way people think about that. So I ran for the school board. And I knocked on every single door, probably not every single door, but a lot of doors in Orchard Beach, because people probably didn't know me out of my own neighborhood, and I was young. And I knocked on every door, and I talked to as many people as I could talk to, and I convinced them that I would love to be on the school board, and that I think I could make a difference. And I was on the school board for 8 years. I was on the school board when they built the new high school. I actually broke ground for the new high school, and they had a groundbreaking ceremony. I took the first shovelful. It might have been the very beginning of, but now girls can do anything they want to do. If you would agree. And I'm sorry I did not become an architect, but I'm an artist, so I still am able to express myself in that way. But staying in Old Orchard was, I think I had to stay here. And that kind of was the reason why I wanted to make a difference.
Your favorite things to do in OOB?
Favorite things to do, and I'll be going to the beach, for sure, going to the beach. I loved golf, and I started playing golf when I was really young with my dad, and I played at Loranger Beach Country Club, which was not dune grass. It was just a little 9-hole course. I think I enjoyed, my grandparents moved here from New York. And I learned a lot about gardening from my grandfather. So there were seasonal things I really liked to do. In the summertime, I really liked being at the ocean, and in the wintertime, I liked to ski. Wasn't in Old Orchard, but I like to do that. I like the community. You know, I like that small community feel where people do know you. I can still go for a walk in my neighborhood and stop and talk to anybody that comes out of their house. So I like that part. I like the part that it's small and people are friendly. I'm sure there's a lot more that I like about it, but I guess I don't think about it. I don't think about it's comfort.
What was your favorite place to hang out?
Favorite place to hang out? I liked hanging out in probably a gymnasium. When this school was the high school, the gym was where the art room is and the rec room, where the rec department is. That was the gym. And when we were young, we knew the coach, John McSweeney. Actually, that gymnasium is named after him. And we would get together, like 4 or 5 of us, and we would just, we'd sneak up here, and he would be having basketball practice with high school boys, and he'd see us. There was like a window up above, and you could look down in. So we would come in the school, and we'd go in those windows, and we'd watch them playing down below, and then he would see us, and when he was leaving, he would look up to see us up there, and he'd roll out a basketball, and he'd tell us to lock the doors when we went out. So we'd go down and we'd play basketball until the street lights went on, and then we would go home. But I liked that. That was one of my favorite things to do. I love walking the beach. I've always liked walking the beach. There's less and less that I like doing in Old Orchard because it's going away. You know, there's no place to shop. There's no place to. It's like there's so much that you can do at home now. You don't even have to leave your house if you don't want to. I liked it when it was when you had to get up and go. But my favorite things were just hanging out with my friends and just having fun.
What did the pier look like when you were growing up?
The pier had the casino on the end. And that was taken out, I believe, in like 78, a big storm in 1978. It was a lot longer, for sure. And it was, there were a lot more shops on it. I remember when the pier fell, because of the storm in 78, there were gift shops out there, more gift shops than there were food places, and all of the gifts were like washing up on shore, all the little like ashtrays, things that you can't even buy anymore, that said Old Orchard Beach on. But, and now the pier is just real, it's short, and it's just games and food places.
Yeah.
I don't really go down there that much anymore. But yeah, I remember there was, so there's a couple of transitions that it made. The big fire changed, and then the big storm in 1978 washed a lot of it away. And that was, I never thought they would build it back, but they built most of it back. But it was, it seemed bigger, probably because I was smaller. And it was the downtown area for me was not someplace I went every single day. When I was really young, like 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, I really didn't even know downtown was there, because we only went there maybe once or twice a year when my relatives from New York would come, and we would go down, and it would be a day of rides, and our mothers would shop, and we would have pier fries, and then that would be it. It would be, and then we went home, and I didn't, even though I was walking distance to it, I never realized it was like right there. We kind of stayed in our little neighborhood, and we went to the beach and toward the Ocean Park area. And then as I got, and then as I forget what the question was.
What's the pier look like?
The
when you
pier.
were-
So yeah, that was the big difference in the pier. But I remember walking out there with my parents and my grandparents and my aunts and uncles, and it was a big deal. It was a big deal. I thought it was about a mile long, and it was not. I always wanted to jump off it. I did not. And it wasn't a place that we really frequented that often. It was just there. I think I thought it was there for other people, not really for people in town. It was always a tourist place.
Do you miss being a kid?
Yes, I definitely miss being a kid. Sometimes. I don't always miss being a kid. I would not want to be a kid now, but I would love to be a kid back then again. And there's a part of me that still is a kid, so I don't think I'm ever going to lose that. I still enjoyed doing things and trying to be as adventurous as I can. I mean, you slow down a little bit when you get older, but I do. I watch kids in my neighborhood now, and it's not the same, and it's kind of sad that they don't. It's more, they come home from school, their parents pick them up at the bus stop, they bring them home, and then I don't see them. It's like nobody plays outside.
Yeah.
Nobody does any of that stuff anymore. So I don't, if I had to be a kid now, I don't think I'd choose it. But if I could be a kid again back then, I'd do it.
Ballpark or pier?
I went to a lot of the concerts at the ballpark. A lot of them illegally. Just because of the where the ballpark is, and it was around neighborhoods, and we lived really close. We would ride our bikes and just go, and we'd stand on the outside looking in. It wasn't important to see who was singing. Like, if we liked who was singing, we would go and we would listen. We also had a friend. He was a police officer. He was a captain, Johnny Marshall, and he worked every single event. And if he saw us hanging around, he'd wave us in, and we'd park our bikes, and we would we would go in and just stand in the back and listen. I saw Rod Stewart. I saw Jackson. I don't think I saw Jackson Brown there. I think it was. I took my niece Stephanie to see the New Kids on the Block there. We went to see, oh my gosh, James Taylor was there, Fish was there. I can't even remember all of them, but there were, I saw a lot of them. There was also, when I was like your age, my brother, again, was like 8 years older, so he got to go to concerts that were down. So there were the Answers on the Pier, which I heard a lot about because my parents danced on the pier. And then there was the Palace. Did you ever hear about the Palace? On West Grand Avenue, you know where the roller coaster is? The amusements where the roller coaster is? Well, there was a big building there, and there were concerts in there. And I didn't really know any of the artists then because I was young, but I used to get my brother, used to beg him to take me to see some of the artists that played back then, like Peter, Paul and Mary, or I can't even remember some of them, but it was just kind of exciting to know that the Dave Clark Five, was it the Dave Clark Five? It was during the Beatles time, so the Beatles never came here, but it was like bands like them came here, and it was kind of exciting to see them, but I was too young to be able to go on my own, so I'd have to bamboozle my brother to take me. It usually cost me money or some sort of chore that I would take off his plate and I would do, and he would have to take me. But I did see a lot of artists at the Ballpark. It was kind of fun. I don't know why they don't do it anymore, because it was a perfect venue. I think there's probably just a lot of organization and nobody really wants to plan that far ahead.
Did you meet any famous people that came to OOB?
I loved politics when I was in high school and through my 20s, or even now. But I worked on a lot of campaigns, and I met Ed Muskie, that was a senator from Maine. I met Ted Kennedy. I met George Mitchell. Actually played basketball one-on-one against George Mitchell. So most of the famous people I think I met were probably, I met Carlton Fisk. A couple of other Red Sox players that used to come and visit people that we knew, and we would get invited and go over and we'd see them. But they would come to Orchard for the same reason, because they liked the beach. And but most of the famous people that were famous to me anyway were politicians. And I was very interested in politics.
Have you seen the Dummy Railroad?
I've never seen the Dummy Railroad. I remember seeing tracks at the top of Old Orchard Street, Main Street in Old Orchard. I remember that there were, before they changed the configuration, there was there were tracks that ran, I can't really remember if they ran like past the town hall or if they ran going down the main street. I never saw any train on it, but I do remember seeing tracks that I wondered what they were for, and I remember my parents telling me what they were. But I never did see the dummy railroad. It's a horrible name for railroad, though.
Were you on the beach when any of the planes landed?
I was on the beach when they had Lindbergh's Landing. It was the centennial, I think. Was it 100 years or 50 years when they did the reenactment of
I think it was, wasn't it 50?
100? It was 100 years. So I actually worked for it. They hired kids in town to sell things like memorabilia, and we got to hang out with some of the pilots that came in, and I got to sit in a biplane, but I was not around when the first, because that's the landing you're talking about, right, when the planes landed on the beach?
Yeah.
It was just a fly-in, it wasn't like people just landing on the beach, or it was an actual fly-in like we had a few years ago that Chase Walker put together when all those planes flew into town on the beach. It was just like that, the same exact thing. Only it was a big celebration of the 100-year celebration of the actual Lindbergh landing.
Did you ever go to any dances in the ballroom?
No. I never went to any dances in the ballroom. My parents went to dances in the ballroom, and I heard a lot of stories about them. And my parents were pretty good jitterbuggers, and they loved dancing. And I can remember sitting in our living room, and of course we had pretty fancy looking record player. It was a big console. The records would drop down on it, and they would dance right in the living room. And then they would tell me stories about winning contests down there, and they were pretty good. They were pretty good dancers. But I never did. I wish I did. But I never did see any dancing in the ballroom.
What were the restaurants like downtown?
I don't remember a lot of restaurants downtown. I don't remember, when we went downtown, it was for a walk and a pizza, and
Beer fries.
and beer fries, and maybe an ice cream, and we came home. I never really ate in any restaurants downtown. I got your questions ahead of time, and I think you've asked all the ones that I wanted to talk about. Well, I did write down some other people that I saw. I saw Paul Simon and Alice Cooper. You probably would remember, but they were pretty crazy. And Fleetwood Mac, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Did you ever hear of them?
Yeah, they wrote a song called Ohio about, yeah,
they were here. I think you guys did a great job. You did a great job. Good questions. I think it was an awesome program. How do you put it back together? How do you put this together?
I think we just make a video.
You just make a video?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
put all the questions together.
Nice.
Just one follow-up question for you. You said you worked in the school system. What did you do?
I started working here, and I worked in the special ed department. And then I worked in the library for a year, which I absolutely hated. And then I worked with Russ Rothingham as an ed tech in the gym. And then from there, I went to, I was the athletic director here for Mr. Shaver, and loved doing that. And then I went to the high school and I worked for the all-dead department with Mr. Knowles, and then I finished at Tides with Mr. Oliver and
What was the program?
the last program,
The second to last one.
All Dead.
Yeah. What's that?
All Dead was, you know, one of the buildings out back by the high school?
Yeah.
It's in that building there. I think they have a different name for it now, but it was Alternative Ed back then.
Oh, alt ed. Oh, it sounded like you said all dead.
Yeah, that's what I thought you
Okay.
said.
All right, now it makes sense.
So I think I always gravitated toward, I love working with students that don't really want to work, you know, that have kind of given up on themselves. And I think I always, you know, worked with those kinds of students to just maybe give them a little bit of, give them I don't know what I gave them, but we had fun, you know. The school doesn't have to be, I think their experiences in school were always either because they weren't great students or they were always in trouble or it wasn't a good experience for them. And for some reason, I kind of gravitated to that kind of a student and feel really good about getting a lot of kids to graduate, get them to graduation. And I still know a lot of them. I still stay in contact with a lot of them. If I see them in the grocery store, they recognize me and I hardly recognize them, but they just have to say a couple things and then everything comes flashing back. But yeah, I worked for 36 years. I just retired last year. 36 years in the school department. So that's the way it feels. I went to school for 36 years and it was enough. It was enough. And I think I'm gonna come back somehow. I think I will come back in some way. And so I think you should give back. I think you should be doing something for as long as you, especially if you've lived in a community this long, you gotta keep giving back.
And you said you were an artist. What kind of art do you do?
I love doing everything. I love stained glass. I love pen and ink. I actually did. It's funny. I go in and out of different things. Like sometimes I'm doing pen and ink, and I feel like I'm doing a really good job, and then all of a sudden the creativity just kind of flows out of me, and I'm done. I can't do it. And then this winter I'm going to take some. I want to get into oil painting, so I'm going to take some classes. I'm trying to get myself hooked up with a local artist that actually does classes, but I don't want a class. I want private lessons. I want somebody just to come to me and paint. But I already in my head know what I want to paint, and I think that's where it happens for me. If I don't have a plan, and it's just I'm all over the place. But if I have a plan, then I think it's easy to stick to. So my first year of retirement, I don't know what are you filming right now?
Yeah.
I don't know my first year of retirement is kind of been I don't know what I want to do yet. I still feel like I can do a lot, but I haven't decided what I want to do. I'm still resting from 36 years of working. I think at some point I'm going to realize that there's my next job, what my next job is going to be. I know it's out there, but I don't know what it's going to be yet. I got a few more years left.
What year did you move to OOB?
I moved here in 1947.
What was it like back?
July 47.
What was it like back then?
What?
What was it like back then?
It was fine. I mean, it was less people, but because we've grown terribly here. But no, I've lived in the same house since 1947.
That's very cool.
I've been there 72 years.
Do you have any siblings?
What?
Do you have any siblings?
Yes, I have one son who lives in Williamsburg, Virginia. Irwin Bates, he graduated from here, from Old Orchard, in 1963.
Does he still live here?
What?
Does he still live here? Oh wait.
No, he lives in Williamsburg, Virginia.
Okay. Thank you. What was your childhood like in OOB?
Well, I was born and brought up in Aroostook County, in a small town called Island Falls, which is 100 miles above Bangor. And it was, well, back then we didn't have what everybody has today. We made our own fun, and we was always outdoors doing things. So it was very simple life back then.
Yeah, I bet without any technology, like
What?
I bet without all this advanced technology.
Oh yeah, I mean you made your own fun, but you were happy.
Yeah.
You were happy, and you were out getting the fresh air all the time.
Yeah. What was your favorite memory?
What?
What was your favorite memory?
I can't hear you.
What was your favorite memory in OOB?
My favorite memory?
Yeah.
Of what?
Of here in OOB.
Being what? Here or
Yeah.
up when
Here.
I was
Here
going
in-
here?
Here.
Well, I don't know. Just having our home and raising my son and so forth. I was a happy lady.
Through the Old Orchard Beach school system?
No.
No?
I graduated where I lived in Allen Falls. I graduated from high school in 1939. It's a few years, dear.
Yep. Okay. What was your first job in Old Orchard?
My first job in Old Orchard. Oh, I did summer work. I was a waitress at a restaurant downtown in the summer. Other than that, I didn't work until after my son was a junior in high school. And then I went to work for the state. And I worked at the motor vehicle office in Portland. And I ended up the last 10 years as manager of the office. And I retired from state service in 1961. So I've been retired over 35, let me see, 61? It'll be 38 years come July that I retired from state service.
Yep.
I've had a wonderful retirement.
I bet. What was your pay?
Huh?
How much was your pay where
My
you worked?
pay? Well, it wasn't very much, dear. Let's see, probably about $15,000-$16,000 a year back then. I'm getting more now on retirement than I was getting when I was working, if you can believe it.
That's good retirement.
Huh?
That's a good retirement.
Yeah.
Did you live in OOB during the?
What?
Did you live in Old Orchard during World War II?
When I worked,
When World War II was going on?
I've lived in Old Orchard since 1947. I've lived nowhere, no other place since then.
What was it like during?
Hmm?
What was it like during the war?
During the war? Well, my husband worked at Sokolowell as a machinist, first class, and they deferred him 4 times, but he couldn't get a deferment anymore, so he had to go in the service. So it was hard for me and just a small baby, but we made it.
Yeah.
We made it.
I heard a lot of people got here.
What?
I heard a lot of people got here during the war because of the ships.
I can't get what you're saying.
So during the war, I heard that a lot of people moved here.
Well,
'Cause-
there's a lot of shipyard
Yeah.
people here, you know, because they were down working in the shipyard in South Poland.
Are there any stories that you would like to share about Old Orchard Beach?
Well, not really, but I don't know, because this is something you have no idea they had. But downtown, as you go up the ramp to go to on the pier, just before you went up on your left, there was a place called Fun House, and they used to have these little carts that donkeys hauled you through these. I never went on it because it was too scary, but I know of people that did. And they take you through all these tunnels, and then there's, you know, how things will pop out at you and all that stuff. And the beautiful merry-go-round that was next to it burnt down, and they was never able to replace, because it was a beautiful, beautiful merry-go-round. They do have one across the street now, but it's nothing compared to that one.
Yep.
So that was quite a bad fire. And then the pier, we had one of those northeasters, and it took the big dance pavilion that was on the end of the pier. It just cleaned it right out. So I that's the only thing. Then during the fires of '47, I would go up to Goodrun's Mills and serve lunches to the firemen, and my neighbor took care of my son. I did that a couple of times. But it's hard to leave your son when you have no one to, you know, babysit him.
Yeah. What are some things in Old Orchard that have like drastically changed?
The what?
What are some things in Old Orchard that have changed?
Changed? Population.
Yep.
The buildings. I mean, there's so many more new homes than there ever was. When you think about it, up around the golf course, there's never anything like that.
Yeah.
So it's and a lot of people from out of state, when they retire, they're coming to Maine because they like it. And so all this building has done wonders for the town. I don't know of anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no industry in town, as you know, just the amusements.
Yeah.
All work for the town.
They make plenty of money off of that.
Yeah, well, I never did that. The only place I worked was for the state.
Have you been a witness or victim of? Have you been a witness or a victim of any catastrophe events in
No.
Old Orchard? No. That's good. What made you want to stay in Old Orchard as an
What?
adult? What made you want to stay in
I
Old
can't
Orchard?
hear you.
What made you want to stay as an in Old
Stay
Orchard?
here in Old Orchard?
Yeah.
Well, 'cause we liked it here, that's all. We had a lot of friends and we didn't want to go anywhere else. My husband worked at the Navy Yard and he used to commute. So, and he retired from there in '79.
Yeah.
No, we liked it here. We had nice friends,
Do they still live here?
yeah. Yeah.
What's your favorite thing to do in Old Orchard?
What?
What's your favorite thing to do in Old Orchard right now?
What's my favorite what?
What's your favorite thing to do in Old Orchard right now?
Well, nothing really in Old Orchard, but I played duplicate bridge. That probably doesn't mean a thing to you, but I played duplicate bridge, and I go to church, but my church is in Pine Point, the Blue Point Congregational Church, and there isn't anything in Old Orchard that I do because downtown doesn't interest me. I've had that.
Yeah.
So I'm not one to go down street in the summer. I'd rather sit at home on my sun porch.
Yeah.
It's pleasanter.
That works. What was your favorite? What was your favorite place to hang out?
What was my favorite what?
What was your favorite place to hang out?
What's the last word you're saying?
What was your favorite place to hang out?
What is he saying?
Place to go, have fun.
I have hearing aids there, and I need he needs to talk clearer.
Okay.
What was your favorite place to like go and hang out with your friends?
We'd go to dances on Saturday night, but we had no place that we went and hung out with anybody. Okay.
What did the pier look like when you were here?
Well, way back it was wonderful because they had benches along the sides, so you could go down and just sit and watch the ocean and the people on the beach. Now you can't do that. They've got all these little shanties with different things in them. I can't remember how long it's been since I was on the pier, but I said to Irwin, I said, I don't care to come down and walk on the pier again. I said, they've ruined it. And they have. They've ruined it. Because it's nothing but these little junk shops. And so it's not, they spoiled the pier by doing this. But
Yeah.
that's business.
Yep.
100 miles above Bangor. And I grew up there and graduated from high school there. And then I left. There's nothing up there, you know what I mean? Like I told them, you make your own fun, and we did. We enjoyed it because we were outdoors all the time. Today, the children don't go out and do things. They're sitting and playing with their little iPads or whatever you call it, you know, because I have 2 great-grandchildren. And when they're here in the summer, it makes me furious to see them sitting and playing with those instead of doing something outside and enjoying the fresh air. But we had all kinds of things we did. And I loved playing baseball with the boys.
What position did you play?
I don't remember, but it was fun. We had a nice field, and we, after supper, we always gang up the kids on the street and play baseball. I preferred that to playing dolls. So I love being outdoors.
Nice.
In the winter, I don't know how my mother stood it. We were out there in the snow all day.
That's
doing things.
nice. Nice.
So I never I never was here when I was young. I was 21 when I came down here.
So was your husband from here?
No, we were both from the same town.
So how'd you choose to come here?
Because he was taken the apprentice course, a machinist at Sokolowell, and he graduated as a first-class machinist. And we lived in Biddeford. And then friends of ours, of his co-worked with, he said, Herschel, I'm going to buy a place in Ocean Park. And he said, I'm making the upstairs a nice apartment. Would you like it? And he said, yes. So that's where I lived during World War II. And they got deferments for Herschel, 4 of them, but they couldn't manage to get any more, so he had to go in the service. So he went in the spring of 44, and I'm pregnant for Irwin. So anyway, he went, and I stayed there during the war. And then when he come home, the lady that had, well, we had 3 landlords while we were there. And the last lady that bought it wanted us to move, but she couldn't make me move because he was in the service. So anyway, when he come home, I told him, I said, we need to find a place. So we bought the little house that I live in on Lawn Avenue in July of 47. And I've been there ever since. It's a bungalow with 4 rooms, bath, a utility room, a back porch, and a sun porch. So it's very comfortable, especially when you're alone.
It's nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So
I don't know anything about a life in Old Orchard except for being a married woman.
right. Well, that's good. That's a good
Yeah.
experience. So you raised your children here.
I only had one son,
One son.
and he's 74.
So he
He's retired, and they're living in, he traveled, he worked for Hartford Steam and Boiler. He graduated from Maine Maritime, and he shipped with Gulf Oil on the Great Lakes for almost 5 years, and then they had their first child, and he said, I didn't get married to be away from home. So he put out resumes, and he went for Hartford Steam and Boiler out of Hartford, Connecticut. And his first assignment was in, I don't know where he went the first year, but he had 6 different locations that he lived in, and the last one was Lexington, Kentucky, and he was there 25 years, and he worked for them 40 years.
wow.
And so then he retired 2 or 3 years ago, and they wanted to be nearer his grandchildren. Jarvis has 2, a girl that's a junior in high school, and a son that is he's a sophomore in high school. So anyway, they finally found a place in Williamsburg. It's called, I can't think what it's called. Ford's Colony,
Okay.
and
No-
it's a beautiful place. I was down there for 2 weeks the year I broke my arm,
Okay.
and so anyway.
Well, let
and
me ask you.
They
So
come here.
you were a young
What,
bride.
dear?
You were a young bride,
I was 21.
and when you came to Old Orchard, and then your husband had to go off to war.
Sir, yeah, right.
So what did you do every day? Did you
Oh, I
work?
just took care of my son because he was a baby.
Yep. Did you go around town? Did you?
No, I lived in Ocean Park when he was in the service. And of course, I wasn't driving. I learned to drive after we moved up on Lawn Avenue in 1947.
Okay.
So I've been driving since 1947, and I'm still driving. But I don't go far. I go to church, go grocery shopping, and drive to Ocean Park. But I don't drive very far anymore.
That's good enough. You don't have to go too far in Ocean
Huh?
Park. you don't have to go too far in Ocean Park. It's really, it's nice. So,
Well, I walked everywhere there because I didn't have a car. I wasn't driving when I lived in Ocean Park. But I had a neighbor that used to take me grocery shopping, and my landlord was very good to me.
very nice. So, you saw changes to this town when the war happened.
Oh, yeah.
What kind of changes?
Well, the population increased with shipyard workers because they moved out into the communities and they worked at the shipyard in South Portland.
So was it just the workers, or were there soldiers that lived in town? Or?
I don't think there was any soldiers. I don't
Mostly
think
the
there
workers.
was. I'm not sure,
Yeah.
but I don't think so.
Did people move near you during that time?
There was not too many in Ocean Park because most of the places are summer cottages. But
Okay.
today, they have converted, I would say about 3/4 of the homes they've converted into year-round homes because other staters owned them as cottages, and when they retired, they sold what they had out of state and retired in Ocean Park. It's a nice place, Ocean
is.
Park.
It is. It's beautiful there.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
Yeah.
Let me just see what else we got. Did you ask her about the fires?
Yeah.
Did she see any?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
Okay, so there were several fires here in town.
Yeah, I told them about the fire at the pier.
Oh, okay, tell me.
Okay, as you walk on that side of the street to go up on the pier, on your left-hand side, they had what they call a fun house. And I told them they had little carts that people sat in and were hauled by donkeys through all these tunnels. And then the merry-go-round was next to it, up on the pier, right on the corner of the pier. And a fire started in the fun house, and it took, so that burnt to the ground, plus the merry-go-round. And they've never been able to replace such a beautiful merry-go-round. They've got one across the street, but it's nothing compared to that old one that they had. And I don't know what year that happened. I can't remember.
Okay, did you take, do you know Idris?
I don't.
I'm sorry, but my hearing aids aren't the best.
That's Johnny Bergeron, he owns Bill's Pizza.
Bill's Pizza. Remember?
You own Bill's Pizza?
Yeah. You might have known my dad,
Well,
Bob.
do you know when the fire
Yeah,
at the pier?
my
Do you
mother
remember
took
when?
me out. I
Huh?
was,
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
I must have been 10 years old.
Oh, you must have been 10 years old? Yeah, I can't remember.
It was in
I do remember the
60s,
forest fires, the
67s.
date, but it's 47. But it was prior to that, I think, that they, or right about the same time, I don't know. But do you remember the fun house?
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
remember the day.
The
the
dirty
fire.
old donkeys?
Yeah,
Oh,
the donkeys used to walk by
yeah,
Bill's Pizza every day.
yeah.
Try and get Johnny in the shot.
So you run Bill's Pizza?
Yeah, yeah.
Now, where is that at downtown?
It's in the Whitehall building.
Oh, yeah, okay. I don't go downtown anymore in the summer. There's
It's
nothing
too crazy.
there and it's too crowded. And I can't cope with it.
I don't
I
blame
said,
you.
I'll sit on my
barely cook
sunboard
myself.
and have my good memories.
Gee. Wow, this is very, very, very good. Nice.
It's 7.
Yeah.
No, 11. Velma's right there. Did you see Velma?
Yeah, I think
I just wanted to ask you, did you take your son on any of the rides at
Oh,
Old
yes,
Orchard?
when he was young, yeah.
Okay. Tell me.
And now it's my great-grandchildren that go on rides.
Nice. And so what rides did you take your son on?
Huh? I'm sorry. I'm making you
It's all
walk.
right. What rides did you take your son on?
Well, just the kiddie rides, you know, that they have. Maybe I don't know if I took him on the Ferris wheel or not. I doubt it. But it was on, you know, the go-karts and the different little rides that they had for children. When he was a teenager, he took himself.
Did you ever go on Noah's Ark?
I don't know. I probably did. Oh, yes, and another thing, they used to have a theater. Do you remember that, Virgil?
What's that?
Bill?
The,
The theater used to be,
at the end of
there
the
was
pier?
Gordon's Restaurant. There was a theater on the left-hand side going up to the pier, because I remember going to the movies there.
Boy,
And after they had that fire, of course, none of that was there.
right. You know, I was
But
young.
Gordon's
but-
Restaurant was on the corner at one time,
Okay.
Someone
and now it's a Victorian mansion or
Okay,
whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah.
Someone who ran the projector at that theater was Bob Curry. They would show a movie right there on the outside at the pier, and then then they would take the projector inside and show a movie inside.
Bob Corey, speaking of Bob Corey, didn't he pass away?
Yes.
Yeah, because I was up to the inn to play cribbage with a gentleman Saturday, and I got usually on the weekend and play 3 games of cribbage with him because he doesn't have company and he loves to play cribbage. So then I went over and said hi to Velma, and she told me that Bob Smith, Bob Corey, and Adele Jakeman Jr., the 3 of them passed away.
Not Bob Smith. Bob Smith is alive and kicking.
Well, thank you. You wait till I see Velma. She better get her act together. Well, that's good.
Somebody told me that about Bob Smith, and then 10 minutes later he called me on my phone.
Oh my God. She should be ashamed of herself telling me those things, and then I told Pat about it, and she said, oh no. She said Bob Corey was supposed to be up here today.
No, I got Bob Corey on videotape. I got him.
Oh, okay.
It's wonderful. So did you know Bob Corey?
Yes, I knew him as a person, but not close or anything.
Okay.
His sister-in-law worked for me. I hired her when I ran the motor vehicle office in Portland.
Oh.
Mary Smith. And I hired her, and when I retired, she took over as manager of the Portland office, and then she retired, and she didn't even live 5 years. She went in for some kind of an operation, and she didn't come out. So she didn't even get 5 years of retirement. And I've had 30, I think it'll be 38 years come July I've been retired from state service.
Nice. Nice. That's beautiful.
Is there anything else you would like to share?
I can't think of anything. No, it's been great, except for when I lost my husband. I've been alone now 16 years. So it's hard.
Yeah, I bet.
But I managed to keep going every day.
Yeah.
I keep busy.
What year did you move to OOB, or were you born here?
I wasn't born here. I first came here when I was about 2 months old, I think. I really don't remember.
Do you have any siblings?
Yes,
Do they
a
live in
brother and
town?
a sister.
Do they live in town?
No, they don't. My sister has passed away. My brother lives on Cape Cod.
I forgot to end the first video. I live in Old Orchard Beach.
On Fern Avenue, where I live today. I think it was Old Orchard is a very small town then. There wasn't much of anybody around in the winter. One thing I remember is that right after Labor Day, 2 streets over from where I live, you could walk down the street and your footsteps would echo because every house was boarded up. There was only 2 houses at the very top of the hill next to Washington Avenue that people were actually living in the winter. So that's very different than it is today. Not safe. But I don't think our parents worried about us as much because it was very safe living here. And I sometimes feel sorry for you guys because we had enormous amounts of freedom. When it was nice, and in the summertime especially, you'd go out the door in the morning, you'd come back for supper time. You had to be home at a certain time, but for the rest of the day, and nobody had cell phones, so they weren't keeping track of where you were or anything. We were often off in the woods or down at the beach or wherever we were. We had a lot of freedom.
School system?
No, I didn't. My father worked in Boston a lot of the time. So, no, I didn't have that opportunity. But it was always home here. And when I had to go to school elsewhere, like in Massachusetts, I always get teased for having that Maine accent. And by the time I was losing it, it was time to come home again. So it was an ongoing thing. I'm not sure you could really call it a job, but my brother was very fond of a girl whose father owned horses. And so they had a stable out where the old kite track was. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but the stables were still standing when we were young. And my brother spent a lot of time with the girl. As I remember it, I spent a lot of time hauling water buckets and cleaning stalls. But I was very happy because I was nuts about horses too. I'm not sure I ever got paid much of anything, and I'm sure I wasn't old enough to work at the time, but that, I would say, was my first job. And we had a lot of fun. We really did. Except when one of the ponies threw my brother on the racetrack and he landed on his back. He was showing off. It was his own fault. That's what I tell him.
Do we have a little bit more backstory on the kite track?
The kite track was a harness track, and it was an A circuit harness track in Old Orchard for many years. I never went there when it was operational because I think it closed in the late 40s or early 50s. And then it was used for various things. Harry kept his horses there, and it was, you know where Walnut Street is?
Yep.
And the old Portland Road. It was in back of there where it's Audubon Sanctuary now. In behind, there's condos all along Walnut Street. In behind there is where the old kite track was. And it was called the kite track because it was in the shape of a kite. Yeah, I was here.
What was it like?
I was very young, but I do remember quite a bit. One thing I remember vividly, although I don't remember where it was exactly, standing in line with my mother for a ration book. You couldn't just go to the store and buy food even. You had to have enough ration points to buy. There were some kinds of food we didn't have much of during the war. You couldn't buy gas unless you had a valid reason for needing to buy gas, and you had to have so many coupon points to buy it. So we did a lot of walking, which was fine. And I just remember standing there with her because it was really boring. And it seemed like we stood there for hours. Of course, it wasn't that long, but to a small child, of course, when you can't get free. And I remember the air raid wardens and the blackout curtains because you couldn't have a single bit of a light showing on the street because they were concerned about planes zeroing in on the communities. I don't think anyone was really aiming at Old Orchard Beach, but we also had guards all along the beach because there were submarines out in Casco Bay and all along the coastline. and they were afraid that there might be infiltration from enemy soldiers or sailors, whatever. There's a story which I don't know if it's true or not, so I don't even know if I should repeat it. But the story goes that, I'll repeat it anyway, of course, but the story goes that at one point they sank a submarine out off the coast. And in the debris that came up from the submarine, they found ticket stubs from movie theaters in Portland, because the sailors who were Germany and France, most of them could speak at least some French. And there was nothing unusual to the ticket sellers in the movie theaters if somebody spoke French. There's a lot of French people in this area. And so I don't know if that's true, if that story is actually verified or not, but it certainly was a common one. Well, one of the best stories that I did not experience, it was my father, because it happened during the Great Fire. And I'm old, but I'm not that old. But my father was about 7 years old when that fire happened, and it was on a Sunday. In those days, you got all dressed up on Sunday. You went to church, you had dinner at home. It was a whole different culture. And he left the house and went downtown on his own. They lived on Central Park Avenue at that time. He was 7, and he walked downtown by himself. And he came racing back to tell everyone that there was a big fire. There was a big fire. And the only thing his grandmother said to him, it was a very hot day, and she looked at him and she said, "Do you mean to tell me you were on the main street in your shirt sleeves on Sunday?" That was her big concern, that he was wandering around in his shirt sleeve, no jacket or anything. And then she told them all to get a paper sack and put in it your most valuable possessions, because they were up on the hill and they could look out and see the fire. And so the kids did. There were 6 of them at that time, I think. And they came out onto the veranda and they stood there and watched. And she said, "If that fire jumps Midnight Path, we're leaving, and we're not leaving unless it does." Midnight Path went through where the mini golf is now. It stopped there because it was all marsh. It was all swamp. So the fire did stop there, and they didn't leave their home at all. Oh, sure. Well, it's so much bigger than it was. You know, you used to know you knew everybody, and everybody, you couldn't get away with anything. I'll tell you that right now. Your neighbors were only too happy to tell your parents if they saw you someplace you weren't supposed to be, doing something you weren't supposed to do. So I guess maybe that's why we were allowed as much freedom, because there was always someone watching out for us in a way. That has changed a lot, I think. Not completely, I certainly hope, but to some extent it has. And things that are gone. Of course, the pier that used to be there, that was an enormous change. And where this school is, or just beyond where this school is, where the high school is, was still part of farmland, and all behind that it was woods, all the way from there to Route 1. And you could wander for hours and hours in the woods. You know, we used to go in fields of the Tickham farm and chase butterflies. We used to catch butterflies for something fun to do. So yes, I'd say that some things have really changed. And one thing that changed, I was waiting in great anticipation to ride the old roller coaster, which in my memory at least was twice the size of the new one they just built. It was huge. It took up a whole block. I'm not sure it was really that big, but you know how if you ever gone back to some place that you haven't been to since you were very small, like your first grade class or something, and all the tables and chairs look so tiny to you? Well, It might be a little bit of that, because I wasn't very big, and I was not allowed to go on that roller coaster until I got to be a certain age, and the roller coaster burned down the year I was gonna turn old enough to ride it. So I never did ride it.
Of any catastrophic events in Old Orchard Beach, and has it affected you in any way?
Well, I was there when the pier burned and the carousel, and that was very sad. That was one of my favorite places as a child. We used to ask my father if we could have 25 cents or a ride on the merry-go-round. And he would say, you can have a ride on the merry-go-round, because I think it was 15 cents at the time. So we knew he was gonna say, no, you can't have 25 cents, but if he'd give us 15, we could go ride the merry-go-round.
Orchard Beach as an adult.
Well, actually, I didn't always stay here. I've lived in a lot of different places. I lived in Florida, I lived in Massachusetts, I lived in New Jersey, West Virginia. I've lived in a lot of places. But it always felt like coming home. It always did.
Do you still feel that way?
Yes. Yes, I do. I go south of the border, I get a nosebleed. No, that's a joke. I don't really get a nosebleed.
To do in OOB.
Go pick blueberries in the woods, slide down Cedar Hill, go to the beach. We were on the beach a lot in the summer, of course. Well, in the winter too, because it was a playground in the winter where maybe not so many people were watching what you were doing.
Do you have a favorite thing to do in Old Orchard Beach now?
Well, I have a lot of friends. We spend time together. I like my neighbors. The church I go to is right here, so yeah, I do still have a lot of things that I enjoy very much. Same answer, there are a lot of them. The beach, the woods, downtown when I got older.
Why?
Because I was a teenager, and that's where all the action was in the summer. The first job I ever had downtown, when I was really legally old enough to work, was I worked for Bob Bellevue down there for maybe 4 or 5 years through high school, and I think even my first year or two when I was in college, I still worked for him. He was a great boss, very fair. But he did expect you to work. Again, we couldn't wait to be old enough to go to work and have some money of our own. And I think most of us, I know my parents and some of my friends' parents expected you to take what you earned and you put a certain percentage in the bank. You could keep some to spend however you wanted to, and the rest went to your family. And I don't think that ever did us any harm. I know it made me feel useful, responsible, that I wasn't always taking, I was giving something back. And I think that's very good for people. I'm sorry, I think there are a lot of kids that don't really get that opportunity anymore, and it's very empowering.
You may not know about today that you may like to share.
Well, the biggest ones, of course, people do know about. The Milliken house, it just recently got torn down, the brick house. And that was very upsetting to me because I knew the story. Supposedly, I know this story is verified. He walked all the way to Boston to learn how to make bricks. And then he walked all the way back and built his own farmhouse around the Milliken Knowles Road. And they tore it down. And it was still in, to me, good shape. I mean, I'm sure it probably needed some stuff every old house does. My house is 160 or 70 years old, so, and it always needs something.
Do you know why they tore it down?
The property sold, and they wanted to develop the area. That's something I'm not always a big fan of. Oh, it was much bigger than it is now, much longer, and even more so when my father was a kid. But the old casino was still at the end of the pier. There was even a movie theater, an outdoor movie theater at the very end of the pier. The old, we showed movies at night, of course, and my mother took my brother there to see Pinocchio. And he was very young, and he got all excited when the whale. So he took his shoe. He took off his shoe and he went out and he wanted to beat it. And my mother had to grab him. She was afraid he was going to fall off the pier. And of course, I remember the pier. I remember going to dances on the pier, and it was a beautiful ballroom.
Do you know why they shortened the pier so much?
Do I know what?
Why they shortened the pier so much?
Well, because it was so much more expensive today to build that kind of structure than it was when they built it. And because the big band era was really over, and I don't think they felt that they would be able to get as much of a return on their investment. I'm not sure that's true, but I imagine that's at least part of it. And also the process for getting permits and environmental approval for a structure like that on the seacoast is much more complicated now than it was way back when. In fact, I think they built like 3 of them and they fell down, and so
Can we have a little bit more backstory about the big band area in Loranger?
Well, it was in its waning days when I was a teenager, but they still had dusk to dawn dances occasionally out on the end of the pier, and Louis Armstrong, and well, maybe you don't know who he was. He was a wonderful
Pretty sure I've heard of him. He's the one who used to stay at the Cummings house, right?
The what?
He used back when like racism and all that stuff was segregation.
Yes.
Was all the thing. He used to stay at the Cummings house on
Oh, yes.
Portland Avenue.
Yes. All the
black people.
Yes, the band members stayed at the Cummings house. Yes. The Cummings have been here forever. Well, obviously not forever, but a very long time. They've always been a part of this community. And yes, and I love the dances. And we also saw Perez Prado when Latin music was very popular. I saw Bill Healy in the Comets out there. Yes, I did.
Wow.
I got the day off, which I didn't usually, but I did that time. And Louis Armstrong he would come to Bob Bellevue's stand when he was through for the night. Every time he came here, he was the nicest person. He was so pleasant and unassuming. Very friendly guy.
Do you miss being a kid?
In some ways, yes, and in other ways, no. And I think probably most people would answer that way. The things that were such enormous problems and worries and so forth when I was a teenager, you look back and they really weren't. So when you get overwhelmed, take a deep breath and realize when you look back 20 years later, it isn't going to seem like that big a deal.
Else you'd like to share?
I think this is a great idea because it must be very difficult for you to relate to people my age or me to relate to people your age if we are not really aware of the environment you live in or that we lived in. A lot of times we didn't have much. Anyone who remembers anything about the 30s has a vivid recollection of that. There were a lot of things we did without, but community was everything. And as long as you had friends, you had family, you were in good shape. So that would be one thing that I would say.
How did you spend your birthdays in Old Orchard Beach?
We didn't have big parties or anything. My birthday is not at a time of year when anything was open downtown. Everything was buttoned up pretty much, so that, family came over and you had a birthday cake and you got to have your favorite meal, whatever it was. Even if your brother and sister didn't like it.
Did you ever see any of the horse races at the kite track?
No, they weren't running horses there anymore. By the time I would have been old enough to go. For all the fires that Old Orchard has had, and we've had a lot of fires, the worst one in the state of Maine skipped us. You could see cinders falling out of the sky. People were, because almost a third of the state of Maine burned in 1947. I think it was 47, I'm pretty sure it was. But because of, I guess, Route 1 and the two rivers, it didn't hit Old Orchard. People, the firemen were on duty for like forever. They didn't get any time off, even from here, because it was all hands on deck for that particular disaster. But it jumped right over Old Orchard. We didn't really have serious damage here, which was a blessing and a big surprise too.